Today we're exploring one of the most emotionally significant transits of this season, Venus entering Cancer. Whenever Venus changes signs, the collective energy around love, relationships, self-worth, beauty, attraction, and emotional connection begins to shift. And Venus moving into Cancer marks a noticeable change in atmosphere. The energy softens, it deepens, it becomes more reflective, more intuitive, more emotionally aware. This is one of those transits that invites us inward. It asks us to slow down enough to notice what our hearts are truly asking for. Because Venus in Cancer is not interested in surface-level connection. It is not drawn to what is flashy but empty. It is not focused on temporary attraction or emotional distractions. This transit wants something real, something nourishing, something emotionally safe enough to grow within. And over the next several weeks, this shift may reveal where your heart is craving deeper honesty, greater softness, and more meaningful alignment. Today, we're going to explore what this transit is here to teach us, and why this energy is such an important invitation for emotional growth. First, let's talk about Venus. In astrology, Venus governs much more than romance. Venus represents what we value, what we're drawn toward, how we connect, how we receive love, how we express affection, how we experience pleasure, how we relate to beauty, abundance, self-worth, and emotional receptivity. Venus reveals what allows us to feel connected, not just to other people, but to ourselves. It speaks to the way we open, the way we receive, the way we soften into what feels aligned. And because Venus moves through every zodiac sign, the collective expression of these themes shifts throughout the year. Each Venus transit teaches us something different about connection. And when Venus enters Cancer, the lesson becomes deeply emotional. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon governs our inner world, our emotional needs, our intuition, our memories, our sense of safety, the spaces within us that seek comfort, belonging, tenderness, and protection. Cancer energy is sensitive, receptive, nurturing, protective. It feels deeply, it remembers deeply, and it often reveals what lives beneath the surface. So when Venus enters Cancer, our relationships become more emotionally charged, not necessarily dramatic, but more revealing. This transit tends to bring our emotional truth to the forefront. It heightens our awareness of whether our connections feel nourishing or draining, safe or uncertain, mutual or one-sided. It asks us to become honest about the emotional foundation beneath the relationships in our lives. Because under Venus in Cancer, emotional safety becomes everything. This transit reminds us that connection is not just about chemistry. It is about comfort. It is about trust. It is about feeling emotionally held. It is about being able to exhale in the presence of another person. And that applies not only to romantic relationships, but to friendships, family dynamics, creative partnerships, and the relationship we have with ourselves. This transit often brings a collective desire to return to what feels familiar and meaningful. You may notice yourself craving more quiet, more softness, more intentional connection, more time at home, more emotional honesty. You may feel less interested in superficial interactions and more drawn toward depth, toward presence, towards spaces and people that feel emotionally restorative. Venus in Cancer tends to awaken the part of us that longs for true belonging, the part that wants to feel understood without having to over-explain, the part that seeks connection that feels genuine, protective, and emotionally reciprocal. And for many people, this transit can become a time of emotional reflection. Old relationship memories may surface. Past emotional patterns may become clearer. You may begin recognizing where your heart has been holding onto things that are ready to be healed. This is because Cancer is deeply connected to memory. It often brings emotional awareness around what has shaped our current relationship patterns. This transit can reveal where old wounds have quietly influenced the way we receive love, ask for support, or protect ourselves from vulnerability. And while that can feel tender, it is also deeply healing, because awareness creates choice. And Venus in Cancer invites us to choose differently, to choose what nurtures us, to choose what feels emotionally aligned, to choose relationships and experiences that support our inner peace rather than disturb it. This is also a beautiful transit for reconnecting with self-care in a deeper way. Not performative self-care, not the kind rooted in escape, but true nourishment, the kind that restores your nervous system, the kind that helps you reconnect with yourself. This is the energy of creating beauty in private spaces, of making your environment feel comforting, of honoring your emotional needs without guilt, of allowing yourself to receive the care you so often offer others. And this is where one of Venus in Cancer's greatest lessons reveals itself. Softness is not weakness. In a world that often glorifies emotional detachment, constant productivity, and self-protection, this transit teaches us the power of receptivity, the power of tenderness, the strength it takes to remain open-hearted. Venus in Cancer asks, what if your sensitivity is part of your wisdom? What if emotional depth is one of your greatest strengths? What if creating safety is one of the most powerful forms of love? Over the coming weeks, each of us will experience this transit differently, depending on our birth chart, specifically depending on our rising sign. Your rising sign determines which house Venus in Cancer is moving through in your chart, and that reveals the specific area of life where this transit is bringing emotional healing, relational growth, reflection, and deeper alignment. For some, this transit will highlight relationships. For others, home and family. For others, career, creativity, healing, or personal identity. And that's exactly what we're exploring in the next parts of this series. We'll break down what Venus in Cancer means for every rising sign and exactly where this transit is showing up for you personally. We'll explore what this transit is activating in your chart, what themes may be surfacing, and what Venus in Cancer may be inviting into your life. So if you want to understand what this transit specifically means for you, head to the next parts of this series, find your rising sign, and discover what Venus in Cancer is here to awaken, heal, and bring into your life. Your chart has a very personal story to tell during this transit, and your rising sign reveals where that story is unfolding. Remember, when listening to transit readings like this, your rising sign gives the most accurate insight because it reveals the house Venus is moving through in your chart. That house shows us where this energy is unfolding, where emotional growth is happening, where relationships may deepen, where healing may surface, and where life is asking you to soften, receive, and reconnect with what feels emotionally true. Let's begin. For Aries Rising, Venus in Cancer is moving through your fourth house of home, emotional foundations, family, private life, and inner security. This is a deeply inward transit for you. After periods of outward momentum and constant movement, Venus now asks you to turn your attention inward, toward your emotional roots, toward your private world, toward the spaces, relationships, and environments that support your nervous system. This transit often brings a strong desire for peace. You may feel less interested in external noise and more drawn toward comfort, quiet, and emotional restoration. There may be a pull to spend more time at home, to create beauty in your environment, to reconnect with family, or to reflect on what home truly means for you now. For some Aries risings, this transit can bring healing around family dynamics or emotional patterns that began early in life. You may begin recognizing ways your past has shaped what you need in relationships now. Old memories may surface. Emotional truths may become clearer. And while this can feel tender, it's also deeply restorative. This transit asks, what foundations are you building your life upon? And just as importantly, do those foundations actually feel safe, supportive, and emotionally aligned? There may also be beautiful opportunities to strengthen your home life during this time. Whether through redecorating, reconnecting with loved ones, creating more intentional routines, or simply allowing yourself to rest more deeply. Venus here is helping you rebuild emotional safety from the inside out. The invitation for Aries Rising is to remember, not every season is meant for pushing forward. Some seasons are meant for restoring what supports you. For Taurus Rising, Venus in Cancer activates your third house of communication, thought patterns, learning, local environment, conversations, and mental processing. This is a transit that softens your voice and deepens your emotional expression. You may notice that conversations feel more meaningful now. Words carry greater emotional weight. There may be a stronger desire to connect through honesty, vulnerability, and thoughtful communication. This transit supports speaking from the heart. Not simply sharing information, but sharing truth. You may find yourself reflecting more deeply on what you've been feeling and seeking ways to express it clearly. This is beautiful energy for journaling, writing, teaching, content creation, heartfelt conversations, and emotional clarity through language. If there have been misunderstandings in relationships, this transit can help create space for healing through compassionate communication. You may also become more aware of your internal dialogue, the stories you tell yourself, the way your thoughts either nurture your emotional well-being or create unnecessary pressure. Venus in Cancer asks Taurus Rising to pay attention to the emotional tone of your inner voice. Is it kind? Is it supportive? Does it create safety? This transit may also bring meaningful reconnections through your immediate environment: siblings, neighbors, old friends, or people who feel familiar and emotionally grounding. The deeper lesson here is learning that your words hold emotional power. And when you communicate with softness and honesty, you create space for deeper connection. Your invitation is to ask, am I allowing myself to express what I truly feel? Because healing often begins the moment truth is spoken. For Gemini Rising, Venus in Cancer moves through your second house of self-worth, values, finances, stability, and personal resources. This is one of the most grounding placements for this transit. Venus here turns your attention toward what truly sustains you, and often this begins with your relationship to worthiness. This transit asks you to reflect on what security means to you, not just financially, but emotionally, energetically, internally. You may feel called to reassess your relationship with money, abundance, and receiving. Where have you undervalued yourself? Where have you accepted less than what reflects your true worth? Where are your choices misaligned with what you deeply value? Venus in Cancer brings softness to this process. This is not about harsh self-evaluation. It's about compassionate honesty, about recognizing where greater self-worth creates greater stability. Financially, this transit can support growth, especially when your choices are rooted in emotional alignment rather than fear. You may feel drawn to invest in what creates comfort, beauty, and long-term nourishment. There may also be opportunities to receive more, but only if you're willing to believe you are available for it. Emotionally, this transit reminds Gemini Rising that self-worth is not built through external validation. It is cultivated internally, quietly, consistently, through the choices you make every day. The question for you is, what am I teaching myself about my own value through the way I live, receive, and choose? Because Venus is helping you strengthen the foundation of self-trust, and that changes everything. For Cancer Rising, this is your personal reset. Venus is moving through your first house of identity, self-expression, confidence, visibility, appearance, and personal magnetism. This is one of the most powerful placements to experience this transit. Venus in your first house enhances your natural radiance. It softens your presence in a way that becomes deeply magnetic. Others may naturally feel more drawn toward your energy during this time, not because you're trying to attract attention, but because alignment creates its own quiet magnetism. This transit is asking you to reconnect with yourself, to nurture your identity, to soften into your own presence, to allow yourself to be seen more fully. You may feel called to refresh your appearance, reconnect with beauty rituals, update your style, or simply prioritize your own emotional needs more intentionally. This is not superficial energy. It is restorative self-reclamation. Venus here asks, how can I become more deeply aligned with who I truly am? Emotionally, this can be a powerful time for self-love work, for releasing outdated self-perceptions, for becoming gentler with yourself, for recognizing that receiving love often begins with allowing yourself to receive your own care first. Relationships may also reflect this shift back to you. As your self-relationship strengthens, your external relationships often begin to mirror that greater alignment. The invitation for Cancer Rising is simple but powerful. Receive. Receive support. Receive softness. Receive your own care. Receive the truth that your presence is enough. For Leo Rising, Venus in Cancer moves through your 12th house of healing, solitude, spiritual reflection, subconscious patterns, closure, and emotional release. This is one of the most inward-facing placements of the entire transit. While much of the world may feel focused on connection and external emotional expression, your journey during this transit is quieter, more private, more reflective. Venus here invites deep emotional restoration. This is a period of reconnecting with yourself behind the scenes, of allowing yourself to step back from external demands and listen to what your inner world has been trying to reveal. You may feel more introspective than usual. You may crave solitude, more rest, more stillness, more space to process what has been quietly unfolding beneath the surface. This transit often brings awareness to emotional patterns that have been operating unconsciously. Old wounds around love, self-worth, or emotional trust may surface for healing. There may be realizations around ways you've overextended yourself, hidden your needs, or carried emotional burdens in silence. And while this can feel tender, it is deeply liberating. Venus in the 12th house often works subtly. Its healing isn't always loud or obvious. It often unfolds through quiet insight, unexpected emotional release, a dream that reveals something important, a sudden understanding that shifts your perspective. This is also beautiful energy for spiritual connection, creative reflection, journaling, meditation, and reconnecting with practices that help you feel emotionally grounded. The question for Leo rising is, what am I ready to gently release so I can create more emotional peace? This transit reminds you that not all healing requires action. Sometimes healing happens through surrender, through rest, through allowing what has been hidden to come into compassionate awareness. Your invitation is to trust the quietness of this season. Something meaningful is being restored within you. For Virgo rising, Venus in Cancer activates your 11th house of friendships, community, collective purpose, future vision, social connections, and long-term aspirations. This transit brings emotional depth to your larger world. Your connections may feel more meaningful. Your social circles may become more emotionally supportive. And you may begin reassessing which relationships genuinely align with the future you're creating. Venus here often brings beautiful opportunities for soul-aligned collaboration. You may feel drawn toward people who offer emotional resonance rather than surface-level interaction. Conversations may deepen, supportive friendships may strengthen, and new connections may emerge that feel intuitively significant. This transit asks you to reflect on belonging, not simply where you fit in, but where you feel emotionally understood and valued. There may also be emotional clarity around your long-term vision. What kind of future are you truly building? Does it feel nourishing? Does it reflect your emotional truth? Or have you been chasing goals that look impressive, but feel disconnected from your heart? Venus in Cancer invites Virgo rising to align future plans with emotional fulfillment, to create success that feels supportive rather than draining, to cultivate relationships and communities that nourish growth. This can also be a beautiful time for reconnecting with creative dreams, humanitarian work, collaborative projects, or goals that allow your emotional intelligence to serve something larger than yourself. The deeper lesson here is learning that your future is shaped not only by ambition, but by emotional alignment. The question for you is, does the life I'm building feel emotionally sustainable? Because true success should feel like expansion, not depletion. And Venus is helping you build a future rooted in deeper emotional truth. For Libra rising, Venus in Cancer moves through your 10th house of career, public image, reputation, purpose, leadership, and long-term achievement. This transit brings emotional awareness into your professional world. It asks you to reflect on the relationship between success and emotional fulfillment. You may begin noticing where your public path feels aligned and where it may feel disconnected from your deeper needs. This transit often brings opportunities to lead with greater authenticity, to soften your approach without losing your strength, to allow emotional intelligence, intuition, and compassion to become part of how you show up professionally. There may be increased visibility during this time, greater recognition, or shifts in how others perceive your presence and leadership. Venus here can enhance magnetism in professional spaces, making this a beautiful transit for networking, creative visibility, career refinement, and building relationships that support long-term success. But Cancer's influence asks for something deeper than achievement alone. It asks, does this path nourish me emotionally? This transit may bring clarity around professional choices that no longer resonate. You may feel called to create a more supportive relationship with your work, to build success in a way that feels sustainable, to prioritize purpose over performance. For some Libra risings, this could also bring healing around external validation, a release of needing success to prove worthiness, and a deeper recognition that your value is not dependent on constant achievement. The invitation here is to redefine success on your own emotional terms, to build a life that feels meaningful both publicly and privately. Venus is reminding you that true authority is rooted in alignment, not performance, and your greatest impact comes when your work reflects what genuinely matters to your heart. For Scorpio Rising, Venus in Cancer activates your ninth house of higher learning, spiritual wisdom, belief systems, perspective, travel, truth, and expansion. This is a transit of emotional growth through perspective. Venus here invites your heart to expand, to move beyond emotional limitations, to reconnect with the bigger picture. There may be a strong desire to explore, to learn, to study something meaningful, to deepen your spiritual practice, or to seek experiences that broaden your emotional and intellectual world. This transit often brings emotional clarity through wisdom, through stepping back and seeing your life from a wider perspective. Questions around purpose, belief, faith, and direction may feel more present now. You may find yourself reassessing old beliefs that no longer support emotional growth. There may be an invitation to trust life more deeply, to release fear-based narratives, to open yourself to possibilities that once felt uncertain. Venus in the ninth house can also bring beautiful opportunities through travel, teaching, mentorship, publishing, education, or spiritual exploration. Relationships may deepen through shared values, philosophical connection, or meaningful conversations that shift your understanding. The question for Scorpio Rising is, what emotional truth am I being invited to grow into? This transit reminds you that emotional security is not always found in certainty. Sometimes it is found in trust, in faith, in allowing your perspective to evolve. Venus is helping you reconnect with emotional expansion and reminding you that growth often begins the moment we allow ourselves to see beyond what we've always known. For Sagittarius Rising, Venus in Cancer moves through your eighth house of intimacy, vulnerability, transformation, emotional merging, trust, shared resources, and deep healing. This is one of the most emotionally intense placements of the transit. Venus here asks you to go beneath the surface, to move beyond emotional independence as protection and into deeper emotional surrender. The eighth house is not casual energy. It governs the spaces where true transformation happens, the places where we confront what we fear losing, where we examine our relationship to trust, where emotional honesty becomes unavoidable. During this transit, relationships may deepen significantly. There may be opportunities for greater emotional intimacy, more vulnerable conversations, or moments that reveal where your walls have quietly remained in place. This transit may also bring awareness to patterns around emotional control, fear of dependence, or difficulty fully opening to support. Venus in Cancer asks, what would happen if you allowed yourself to trust emotional closeness more fully? There may also be healing around shared resources, financial, emotional, energetic, or relational. This is a powerful period for releasing old fears around receiving support, for understanding that vulnerability is not loss of power. It is often where the deepest forms of connection begin. Emotionally, this transit may feel profound. You may notice old attachment patterns surfacing. Past wounds around trust may become more visible. But this is not here to destabilize you. It is here to help you transform. The invitation for Sagittarius Rising is to soften into emotional depth, to trust that intimacy does not weaken your freedom. It deepens your capacity for real connection. Your healing happens when honesty replaces emotional distance. For Capricorn Rising, Venus in Cancer activates your seventh house of partnerships, committed relationships, one-on-one dynamics, reciprocity, and emotional exchange. This is one of the most relationship-focused placements of the entire transit. Your attention naturally turns toward connection, toward the emotional quality of your closest relationships, toward understanding whether your partnerships feel truly reciprocal. This transit often brings greater tenderness into existing relationships. Communication may soften, emotional honesty may deepen. There may be opportunities for healing through vulnerability, compassion, and greater emotional presence. If you're in a relationship, this is a beautiful time to nurture emotional intimacy, to reconnect with what creates closeness, to create space for deeper understanding. If you're single, Venus here can draw meaningful connections into your life, particularly relationships that feel emotionally safe, grounding, and supportive. But Cancer energy always asks for authenticity. This transit may also reveal where emotional needs have gone unspoken, where imbalance exists, where relationships have been functioning more through structure than emotional connection. Venus asks, does this connection allow me to feel emotionally supported, seen, and safe? For Capricorn Rising, this can be a profound period of learning to receive. You often carry immense strength. You often become the stabilizing force for others. But this transit asks whether you are allowing yourself to be supported in return. The deeper lesson is that healthy partnership is not built on responsibility alone. It is built on emotional reciprocity, on mutual care, on the ability to soften with one another. The invitation here is to allow love to feel nourishing, to trust emotional interdependence, and to remember that real strength includes receptivity. For Aquarius Rising, Venus in Cancer moves through your 6th house of daily routines, health, well-being, work, habits, service, and the systems that support your everyday life. This transit may seem subtle at first, but its impact can be deeply restorative. Venus here asks you to create more emotional nourishment within your daily world, to examine whether your routines support your well-being or quietly drain it. This is a powerful transit for bringing softness and intention into your habits. You may feel called to slow down, to care for your body more intentionally, to create daily rituals that restore your nervous system, to make practical changes that create more peace. Cancer energy here highlights emotional wellness through consistency. It reminds you that healing is often built through small acts of care repeated over time. This transit may also bring emotional awareness into your work environment. You may begin noticing where your daily obligations feel aligned and where they no longer support your emotional health. Questions around balance, burnout, boundaries, and support may surface. Venus asks, does my daily life feel emotionally sustainable? This is also beautiful energy for improving relationships with coworkers, collaborators, or people you interact with regularly. There is greater compassion available in everyday interactions and opportunities to create more supportive systems around yourself. The lesson for Aquarius Rising is that emotional well-being is not separate from productivity. It is the foundation that sustains it. The invitation is to create a life that feels good to live each day, not just a future that looks impressive from a distance. Your healing happens through honoring the small daily choices that nurture your whole self. For Pisces Rising, Venus in Cancer activates your 5th house of creativity, joy, romance, pleasure, self-expression, inspiration, and heart-centered connection. This is one of the most beautiful placements for this transit. Venus here opens the heart. It invites emotional renewal through joy, through play, through creativity, through reconnecting with what makes you feel alive. This transit often brings a heightened desire for emotional expression. You may feel more inspired creatively, more open romantically, more connected to your natural capacity for wonder and imagination. There is a softness here that feels deeply restorative, a reminder that healing does not always happen through intensity. Sometimes healing happens through delight, through laughter, through creating, through allowing yourself to experience pleasure without guilt. Romantically, this transit can bring sweetness and emotional openness. Connections may feel more heartfelt, more intuitive, more nurturing. There may be opportunities for deeper emotional resonance in dating or existing relationships. For some Pisces risings, this transit may also reconnect you with your inner child. You may feel called back to passions, creative outlets, or simple pleasures that once brought you joy. Venus asks, what allows my heart to feel fully alive? And perhaps even more importantly, have I given myself permission to receive that joy? The deeper lesson here is that joy is not frivolous. Pleasure is not a distraction. Creative expression is not optional. These are sacred pathways back to yourself. The invitation for Pisces Rising is to let your heart lead, to trust what inspires you, to create, play, love, and express yourself freely, because your emotional healing is deeply connected to your willingness to experience joy fully. As Venus moves through Cancer, these rising signs are being invited into emotional alignment through transformation, relationships, daily care, and heart-centered expression. And though each experience looks different, the collective message remains the same. The more honestly we nurture what feels emotionally true, the more naturally life begins to soften into alignment. This completes our Venus in Cancer through the Houses series. Your chart reveals exactly where this transit is unfolding for you and what Venus in Cancer may be healing, awakening, and bringing into your life over the weeks ahead. Thank you for tuning in to Daily Astro. And remember, sometimes the greatest shifts happen when we stop resisting softness and allow ourselves to receive what our hearts have been quietly asking for all along.